Good morning, and welcome to the Daily Huddle. Today is Tuesday, and on Tuesdays, we talk about communication and relationships. And I am one of the Tuesday hosts. My name is Tara Heaton, and I am delighted to be here today and talk about something that I think we all can agree is absolutely crucial to communication, and that is trust. So I wanted to peel back trust and really inspect how it affects our relationships. And I'll tell you why. Because I think on the surface, we all think, absolutely, I'm truthful. Absolutely, I'm honest. And absolutely, I can be trusted. But there are a lot of aspects and layers to trust and different ways to look at it that lets me see that I can always grow that trust gene. I'll give you a great example that happened just yesterday. My daughter, many of you know, she's 32 years old and she has major neurocognitive disorder. And what that simply means is that she is cognitively and intellectually very, very challenged. And this is due to many, many years of seizures. Well, she has a boyfriend and he is on the spectrum, and their conversations are delightful. Just yesterday, we went on a double date. My husband and I took Caroline and her boyfriend out to lunch. And I was listening to their conversation in the back seat. And Caroline asked, she said, "Who did you vote for the president?" And her boyfriend very confidently said, "I'd rather not say." And I thought to myself, right on, brother. Rather than being dishonest because you are afraid to say something that the other person might not agree with, we have the ability to always say, that is something I prefer not to get into. And I love that strength and courage. I think that many of us who do not have major neurocognitive disorder tend to tell little white lies. We tend to, if someone asks us, it gives us permission to be less than honest because we don't want to share something that is private to us. So I'm strengthening my trust gene by reminding myself, I don't need to tell a little white lie. If I don't want to share something, I will find the courage to say exactly that. That's not something I want to get into. So I want to take us a little bit into some research around trust and why it is so crucial and how we all have the ability to continue to grow and strengthen our ability to be trusted. This builds stronger relationships, not only at home, but particularly in teams. And that's going to be where we focus a lot today, is trust in teams. So I want to share some research that really shines a light on the power of trust. And it is something called the Aristotle Project. I don't know if you've heard of it, but the Aristotle Project, it was named after that because of Aristotle's famous quote that the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. Back in 2012, there was a project launched at Google, and the attempt was to see what behaviors, what patterns and behaviors are indicative of high-performing teams. That was the goal of the project. And they did immense amount of interviews and they did all kinds of studies. I mean, it's Google, right? This was highly data-driven, and they had hundreds of participants. And they came back and they found 4 components to high-performing teams. And those were these, which will not surprise you. Dependability is one, structure and clarity is another, meaning, which I would often call purpose, but meaning in your work, and impact. Are we making an impact? They found those 4 components to be crucial to high-performing teams. But there was a big gap. Even though these seem to be indicative of successful teams, the highest performing teams may or may not have had all of these. So they continued to do research until they identified one overarching component to high-performing teams that seemed to be that magic bullet. And that magic bullet, the number one most important thing for high-performing teams, was psychological safety. And if you break down psychological safety, it is all about trust. So what we can learn from that is, even though our teams the people are dependable and the expectations are clear and there's meaning and there's impact in their work, if people do not feel comfortable and safe to offer a different opinion, a divergent opinion. If they don't feel comfortable and safe to disagree, share big ideas, that takes away from our ability to increase our performance as a team. We can apply this to a team at work. We can apply this to a nonprofit in the community. We can apply this to our friends and family. So that's what I want to peel back today is psychological safety, because these all go into our ability to continue to grow our ability to be trusted. Before I dig into 4 components of trust, I do want to share one more interesting thing that I have uncovered from one of my favorite thought leaders, and that is Simon Sinek. He tells a story about the Navy SEALs, and he also talks a lot about military and how they build the trust gene. And I think this really shines a light on where we're going with this conversation today. He said that, and obviously, trust is absolutely crucial to Navy SEALs, to SWAT, to Marines, anyone that's going out there and protecting each other's lives. Well, how do they build this trust gene amongst teams? And he gave a really cool example. He did a study at Quantico, and he interviewed a lot of folks. And one of the leaders there said this, that they are able to identify who can be trusted by people that take responsibility for their actions before they're proven. So let me explain that for a minute. Several of the Marines over time will show up late to their post. The ones that made excuses for their behavior were that they became less trusted than those who took responsibility for their actions before there was proof. So, were you late? Someone could say, well, I know nobody knew, so I won't tell anybody. Or someone could say, yes, I was late, but it wasn't my fault. But the person that owns their error, those are the people that can be trusted. And so that's a great starting point for how we can really, really build that trust gene. But let's break it down into 4 different components and talk about each one of those. And these components of trust are this: safety, respect, comfort, and compassion. Those are all aspects of trust. And when we build those, we are building what I call a reservoir of trust. If we take the time to invest in all 4 of those, then when we need somebody on the team to respond, to perform, to just do as we ask without asking any questions, they do that because they trust us. So let's break that down. Let's first talk about safety. This goes back to that Aristotle study, the Project Aristotle, and psychological safety. We need to create an environment, again, whether it's with our partner or whether it's with a team, where the other person feels safe to be vulnerable. One of the most powerful ways to do that is to have the courage to be vulnerable first. Especially in a work setting, we tend to want to present perfection, that we have all the answers, that everything is clear, and we're completely equipped to do the job without any assistance. That's a barrier to trust. So to show up to a meeting or in a conversation and share where we're struggling invites the same in return. That shows that we're human, and that builds trust. Knowing everything is not the key to a powerful and strong and trusting relationship. It is having the courage to share our truth. And we, especially as leaders, can build a safe setting by encouraging this type of communication. How do we encourage it? By leading with it, by not having all the answers. That encourages others. All right, let's take number 2, respect. Oftentimes, we will hold back in our communication because we want to be respected. So reminding ourselves that respect is part of trust, and it takes time to build that. This means that as an organization or in any relationship, that we take the time to identify the traits that we value most. And we encourage each other to lead with those and to communicate in light of our values. We have to remember that not everyone's values are the same. This is why oftentimes when people tell me that when I do exercises around core values and someone says integrity, I always push back on that word. And the reason for that is because integrity could mean so many things to so many people. So I encourage you to take some time to identify what your core values are and get really specific. Integrity is a broad word. Being honest is a broad word, but being accountable, being generous, being genuine, being focused on individuals, being intentional, being mindful, all those are very specific. And when we are aware of what our core values are, then we're prepared to share them and ask people in our lives to help us to live in alignment with our values. That again takes courage. All right, so we've got safety, we've got respect, and the third one is comfort. Are we in a setting that makes us feel comfortable and safe and relaxed? There is so much conversation around get out of your comfort zone, get out of your comfort zone, that I personally believe that it has contributed to our anxiety. And here's where I see comfort as just a beautiful part of teams. Are you comfortable enough to be uncomfortable because of your team? Think about that for just a minute. This feels uncomfortable to me, but I have so much trust with this team or this partner or my family that I feel comfortable in taking that risk. I taught a storytelling workshop last week, and it was really fascinating for me to see that some of the people in the room, when it was their turn to share their signature story, had complete comfort and confidence in setting this tone and saying, here's my audience, here's what I want to work on, and maybe delivering a story that was not perfect or not even close to being perfect, but they were comfortable in showing up and giving their best. That made them feel uncomfortable, but they were comfortable with the setting. There were a few other people in the workshop who really did not have the courage or confidence to even begin to share a story in that room. So the only way to grow this, much like safety, is to model it first. Model it first. Show up and make sure to show the people in the room that they can step out of their comfort zone and you're there to make it more comfortable for them. That means zero judgment, showing up with curiosity and compassion. And that takes us to our fourth component of trust, and that is empathy and compassion. I like to save this one for last because I think it is crucial to building trust. And this simply means to stop doing what we all have our human nature is to make assumptions, is to assume things about other people. And then we go to assuming what we would do if we were them. We can never know what brought someone to their level of confidence, to their level of skill, to the way that they think, to the way that they vote, to the way that they speak. Not only is it their DNA, but it's also their life experiences that brought them to where they are. And so if we create an environment of curiosity and really seek to empathize with other people's experiences, it builds psychological safety. And that is really the focus of the conversation around trust today, is building psychological safety so that we may be efficient when we need to be really spot on, no questions asked. We've built that reservoir of trust that allows us to say to our team or to our partner, could you please just do this, no questions asked? Now, what's interesting, and then I'd really love to hear your take on this, but there are some barriers to building these trusts. And I want to inspect that because I think that will help us to grow that confidence gene. And there are four barriers, four primary. I've studied about 6 of them. Well, exactly 6, but I want to focus on 4 today. 4 barriers to building and growing our trust. And those are vulnerability, rejection, priorities or time, and capacity. So let's break those down. We've already touched on vulnerability. I just want to remind us that being vulnerable does not mean sharing what is private to you. Vulnerability means sharing the emotions around situations, not telling somebody something you don't want them to know. That has nothing to do with vulnerability. It means being honest about the emotions that surround us, whether it's at work, in a project, anywhere that we may be. It's sharing a part of us that is true, that we tend to conceal. That's being vulnerable. I heard another person say, and I love this, is they see vulnerability as the willingness to learn and grow. I've had some folks come to my storytelling workshops, and as much as I just want to give them the courage to be coachable, they simply are not. They're much more comfortable telling everyone else what they think they ought to do to improve their story. But when it comes to their turn, they simply don't have that capacity. I believe anyone can learn this, but it absolutely takes intention. So, again, that is one of the barriers to our ability to be trusted. Do we see you with the ability to be vulnerable? That builds trust. All right, let's take another one that stands in the way of building trust, and that is rejection. From the time we were very small, there's a part of us, part of all of us, that fears being rejected. And if we stop and ask ourselves why we're not willing to share the vulnerable part of ourselves, therein lies our answer. We are afraid to be rejected. Now, I know many of us will say, I don't care what people think about me, and I don't care, and I'm just going to say what I believe. I used to say that, but you know what I've learned? I do care what people think about me, to a point. I'll share what I mean by that. If someone sees me as not living in alignment with what my core values are, that will bother me. I don't want someone to think that I am manipulative. I don't want someone to think that I'm malicious. I don't want someone to think that I'm selfish. Those things do matter to me. And so what I've learned is, rather than fearing that I may be rejected, is again, going back to that courage gene, have the courage to address situations that feel like they are not in alignment with our ability to build trust with someone else. Will this make people uncomfortable sometimes? Sure, and that's okay. All right, the third barrier to trust is pretty simple, but it's worth talking about, and that is priorities and time. I can think back to the years when I was running a business, managing a family. I had about 10 employees, and all these employees really wanted was for me to slow down and give some time to building a relationship with them. And you know what? I didn't seem to do that. I was all about winning and fighting and efficiency and getting things done and getting back home. And those folks worked for me. And I did certainly appreciate them, but I was not really investing in a relationship with them. If this feels like a little part of you, even at all, here's the beautiful part of it. When we invest ourselves, our time and our intention and our compassion into other people, at work or at home, it builds that reservoir of trust. It contributes to our ability to be efficient, or in the words of the Aristotle Project, it contributes to a high-performing team. So when we think we might not have time to build personal relationships with our team, remember this: we are investing in performance. And if that's motivating to you, then please, I encourage you to remember that. And the last barrier to trust is capacity. This one gets me. Oftentimes, I think that we see relationships as time, the investment of great amount of time, like I just referenced. That's not it. It's about being vulnerable, being intentional. It's about quality. So capacity, if we feel like we don't have the capacity to build a relationship, the answer to that is quality over quantity. And I have a personal experience when I look back over my life where I regret not seeing this. And it was again in those years when I was running a business, managing a family, and trying to cure epilepsy for my middle child. When my youngest daughter, Holly, would come and need me to be nothing but soft, I didn't have the capacity for it. I would talk her out of her feelings by saying, oh, things could be worse. Come on, toughen up. I didn't have the strength to be soft. And sometimes that is all that other people need. They don't need solutions. They don't need answers. All they need is for us to listen, to have the capacity to absorb their emotions in the moment. I believe that I didn't want to absorb other people's emotions, whether it was at work with that team or at home with my very own daughter, because I feared that they would drown me. But I have learned that when we absorb other people's emotions, guess what? It turns into strength because we build that trusted bond, and that gives us energy and strength. It will not drown us. It does the opposite. When we take time to be intentional enough to have the capacity to really get to know somebody, it makes us stronger. It contributes to that high performing team. So that's a bit of a breakdown on trust. I want to summarize it for you and then see if you have any thoughts on this topic. As I mentioned from the beginning, we all believe that we are trustworthy. I also believe that we can continue to grow the ability to be trusted. And that means thinking about 4 components of trust that will contribute to our reservoir of trust with each relationship that we have. And those are safety, respect, comfort, and compassion. So I'd like to know if you all have any thoughts on this topic or questions or comments. And I'd also like to know how you see trust.
Wow, Tara. I
Hi,
mean,
Steph.
trust. Hi, trust. That is such a. I don't know. It's a. Ooh. To me, it exists, or it has. It works on so many different levels, and that yeah, I think it's a quality that basically you gotta start somewhere where you kind of trust yourself. Because if you don't really trust yourself, you can't really trust other people because other people are you. You know, other people,
Mhm.
they're people like you. And when you find reasons to distrust yourself, you are actually finding reasons not to trust other people too. So it's kind of like it's tied up in the area, I think, of forgiveness. I think we can be really, really hard on ourselves, and especially sometimes we can be hard on ourselves just about things we think.
Mhm.
Might not even have gone to the point of actually committing anything, right? But just we can be so down on ourselves so much just on the things we think. And I think that we have to give ourselves some grace. Give ourselves some grace. Let some things go in our lives. Forget and learn to just stretch it back out on a certain basic belief in our basic goodness across the board. We mess
Oh,
up, we make mistakes, but we got to trust ourselves to know that there's a source that created us, and it created us basically good. When we're off and we mess up, it's really when we're in error.
mhm.
And so I think we have to trust ourselves that we are going to get it right. We have to give ourselves some grace. And
Mm.
I think in that space it allows us to give others grace too.
Thank you for saying that. I really took 2 things from it, and one of those I don't think I've ever stopped to think about, but is making so much sense to me. If we don't trust ourselves, we see ourselves in other people,
And other
right?
people.
So
Hmm.
if you don't feel that you can be trusted, if you don't trust yourself to do right, to work hard, to be generous, to be whatever it is that you value,
Hmm.
then you're basically assuming that other people are the same as you, right?
Yeah,
Is that what you're
yeah.
saying?
I think so.
Heck of a point. So at the end of the day, it starts with ourselves.
Hmm.
And then when the second half of that is, we're not always going to get it right,
Do it
correct?
right. Yeah, we're not. Yeah, we're
Yeah.
not. And that's the kicker.
Yeah. I used to, that term, give ourselves grace. I used to not be able to stand it. And I think it kind of goes back to what you're saying is I always saw myself as absolutely trustworthy because if someone asked me not to repeat something, I don't repeat it.
You can tell it. Yeah,
And,
yeah,
but there's so many more components to it. And it really does start with that vulnerability gene. People can't trust us if they don't know us. And we have to let people see all sides of
right.
us,
That's true.
right? Not just
Yeah.
our buttoned up Facebook face or our C-suite, I'm in charge face. I have a client that I was just working with yesterday. She's interviewing for a new job. And I asked her what are the three reasons why the company should hire her. And one of the things that she said, I've never heard this before, and I thought, wow, that is quite a trait. She said, I know when to be a leader, I know when to be a team player, and I know when to be a follower. I thought that was really something spectacular. Like some of us think I'm always a leader. I always have to be the one with the answers, the one at the front of the room. And some others think I'm always going to be the one to sit back and listen and pay attention. Neither of those, I don't think. I think what she said is it depends on the setting and the situation. Does this call for the need to be in charge and to have some answers? Or does this call for the need to lean in, to be empathetic and simply just to listen and do what you're told? And I think those all come into play there. So that's good stuff. I think the final thing, if you could take anything away from this conversation, what I would encourage you to do is to remember that we can continue to build our ability to be trusted in three ways: with courage, and with an investment in time, and with intention. We have to stop and ask ourselves, am I presenting my truth to this person? So it starts by presenting our truth, not our privacy, but sharing our truth. That is what will build greater connection, build psychological safety, and contribute to greater relationships and higher performing teams. Thank you for being here with me, you all, today.
Thank you, Tara. Thank you.
Absolutely. It has been
Yeah.
wonderful conversation, and I hope that you will take a piece of it with you into the world and continue to build trust, particularly in a time in our country where, whew, I think we need it most. I did something terrible this morning. I did it again. I turned on the news.
Okay.
I did not know that the news could cause tears to spring to my eyes, but
Woo.
I've done that several times lately.
Okay.
So let's lock arms together. Let's remember to be curious and empathetic and compassionate. As a matter of fact, I will take those notes and I will close us out with the tenets from the Daily Huddle. And the first of those is love. However you see love, show up with love. Lead with that before arrogant opinions or a self-righteous mindset. Lead with love and curiosity. Be generous. Be generous with your heart, your time. That will build trust and better relationships in your life. Also, don't take everything too seriously. We do need laughter. Take time to giggle, laugh with your friends, throw your head back. Nothing, almost nothing is permanent. So take time to laugh. And remember to take care of yourself and reduce your stress. How do we do that? Putting more plants, mostly plants in our body, a lot of water, getting our sleep, and getting up and making sure that we move that body and get our exercise. Thank you all so much for being here on the Daily Huddle, and we'll see you next
Thank you,
time.
Tara.
Thank you, Stan. Thank you all.